Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is on the subject of sports psychology. We're going to take a look at what it is in sports that cause people to, under pressure, do their best. We call that clutch, or do their worst. We call that choke.
The whole field of sports is interesting, I think, especially when we consider reasons for sport. The first has to do with testing our limits, finding out what we're able to do. Certain people have particular talents and are better than others at something, so they develop that, whatever that talent may be. But there's also to take the war out of men. I think the Olympics were originally started by the Greeks to get the warrior to relax a little bit.
Something to do with all that testosterone, you know.
Their antidote for post-traumatic stress disorder back in the day, I'd say it that way. And so sports really does touch us on a really deep level, whether it's inhibiting the violent nature or channeling it and redirecting it, at the same time developing the wonderful nature of aspiring to be the best we can be.
Yeah, that is one of the great things about sports, is that it gives us an opportunity to measure ourselves, an opportunity to see how well we do against others and against ourselves. It gives us an opportunity to practice something over and over and over again so that we can get to be so good at it that we can actually perform with it. One of the most important things to understand that all great athletes in any sport understand is that sports is really about getting better in practice and doing the best you can do at this moment in the moment of performance. That is, playing the sport isn't where you get better at the sport. Performing is where you perform at the level you're at. It's when you practice the sport, not during the game, not when there's a winner or loser, not when the performance counts. It's when you practice, and there's no harm in making mistakes, that you try new things, that you improve on your game, that you get better and better and better, so that when you do perform, you can perform at the highest level you're at. People who are not really athletes, who think, I can just go out and play baseball a whole bunch and get better at baseball, don't really understand. You don't get better at baseball playing baseball. You get better in batting practice and fielding practice. Practice is where you get better.
This is a real important point, and seems to me a few months ago, Steve, we did one of these episodes on making new mistakes. And maybe only talked a little at the time about sports, but now we're bringing that up again. There's got to be a place where it's okay to make new mistakes. Maybe even revisit some old mistakes to say, why is that a mistake? Or what about this makes it less efficient, less powerful, more challenging to my ability to be coordinated, whatever, to take a look at all of that. And you're right, if your coach is an autocrat, and that could be yourself if you're self-coached, right? If your need to always perform and always be your best, as if your best girl was always in the stands or the gallery watching you, and that's who you're really doing it for, well, you're probably going to inhibit your overall performance in the long run because you're not allowing for the flexibility to make some new mistakes, to just try this, to try that. And the best coaches are those that create a separate session or series of sessions called practice, as you say, where you don't practice being perfect. You try this. If you're a batter, you choke up on the bat. You try a heavier bat. You try a lighter bat. You try moving forward in the batter's box, or maybe back in the batter's box, or you hold your right elbow a little higher, whatever. You get to play around with it a little bit. And even pros, we see the best pros are those that are willing, even at the peak of their success, to take another look, to reanalyze. And if we don't leave ourselves room to practice, to play around a little bit, then the pressure of performance, of always being good and yet never quite good enough, is going to degrade the game.
Yeah, indeed. And in the practice, of course, all parts of practice have to feel good. You see, if when you're practicing, let's say golf, for example, and you go to the driving range, not the golf course, but the driving range, and you hit a golf ball and you hit a bad shot, well, if you don't like hitting that bad shot, you get upset with yourself, frustrated, like something wrong happened there, then your mind is not going to like practicing very much. It doesn't like that experience. So if you don't like hitting bad shots, you won't like practicing enough to get to be the best you can be. What you have to do when you hit a bad shot is to go, oh, boy, I'm glad I got that out of my system. What can I learn from that bad shot? That bad shot has more to teach me than a good shot does. So if I hit a bad shot, I want to instantly take a deep breath and and release, because nothing bad happened. I hit a bad shot. Nothing went on a scorecard. I didn't lose any money. I didn't lose any prestige. Nothing bad happened. I hit a bad shot, and now I've got a learning opportunity. So I want to hit that bad shot and go, I feel safe. Hitting bad shots are totally safe, and what can I learn from that? And then when I hit a good shot, then what I want to do, and this is so important, key to every great athlete, is to close my eyes and go to the alpha state, go to what we call paradise, and mentally rehearse and do that same good shot in your mind over and over and over and over again. So one good shot becomes a dozen good shots, and you can see it in slow motion, and you can feel every aspect of it, and you can re-experiencing it from like you're real close watching it or you're way out in the distance watching it. You can see it as a movie, or you can see it as a three-dimensional experience, but the bottom line is, all great athletes know that, for example, hitting the golf ball right once is wonderful, but then you can take that one experience and make it a dozen experiences or even more by visualizing it again and again and again in your mind.
Steve's foreshadowing the visualization part, and then there's another passion that follows that. We're going to get into that, but I want to dwell a little bit on what you're talking about at the top here, the idea of the negative reinforcement emotionally. Like, we all remember John McEnroe, right? And the way he would get so upset at the judges, and he'd throw his tennis racket, and he'd curse, and, "Are you kidding me?" And he would just have these tirades, and I always thought, that's got to be a put-on. He's got to be trying to intimidate the judge so that the next time there's a close call, the judge will, even if unconsciously, award it to McEnroe because he was scared and intimidated by all the screaming and shouting. The guy is just too good a player to allow anger to degrade his game. That's why I always thought it was a put-on. Any good athlete knows that if you lose it, if you get angry, if you start cursing, if you, as you were saying, just get upset with yourself because you didn't like the shot, that just increases the likelihood that you're going to continue to make the same mistake, the same bad shots. Everybody knows what a bad day is like, right? Just had a bad day. I just couldn't get into the groove. Well, once you're in the groove, then the brain goes, oh, good, give me more like that, more that feel that way. Oh, the sweet spot. Oh, it's easy. Feel the letting go. Just let it happen. Get out of your way. All of those things come into play. But if you don't feel that groove, we're going to show you how to do it with this visualization, this focus, and the passion that we're all about, focused passion. We'll talk about how to do it. But first, you have to catch yourself at this anger and this frustration that comes from hitting a bad shot. As Steve says, take a breath, and as you let it go, like forgive yourself and accept, how else could I learn? But by not only making mistakes, but responding appropriately to the mistake.
So again, no harm done in practice when you hit a bad shot. In fact, that's one of the reasons you're there. See, the practice part is where you do the thinking. You think, let's see, do I move my shoulders this way? Do I stand forward or backward? How do I do this? And I hit a bad shot. What does that mean to me? What did I do wrong, or what do I need to do different? You do all your thinking when you're doing your practice. And then when you hit the groove, when you get it right, then you do it right over and over and over again in your mind and in reality over and over and over again, so that when you go to perform, you don't think. You see, thinking is what kills you when you try to perform. If you try to think about the way you hit it, that's what causes choke. It's when people, like, under pressure, they start thinking too much, and all of a sudden the autopilot that knows exactly how to do this thing right, because it's done it a million times, gets all confused and all messed up, and you try to think your way into the success, and you can't.
And most of what you end up thinking in those situations, because the pressure's on, so the mind's overstimulated and jumping around. And what is it thinking? It's thinking of all the things not to do.
I don't want to fail because if I fail, this horrible thing could happen. Oh, and I sure don't want to hit the ball over there. Yeah, and all that stuff's going on. And even if you're thinking, no, I can't be thinking this, if you're off autopilot, if you've taken your mind and you've turned off the autopilot and you're just thinking, whatever it is you're thinking, positive stuff, negative stuff, doesn't matter what you're thinking. You don't want to be thinking. The classic, somebody asked Yogi Berra, what do you think about when you hit the baseball? And Yogi said, I can't think and hit the baseball at the same one time. It's like when I hit the baseball, I go up there to just hit the baseball, you know. It's such an enormously minute amount of time that you have to decide whether to swing at the baseball or not from the time this 90-mile-an-hour pitcher's throwing it at you. It's a tiny part of a second. You know, if you think, you don't have time to think. You have to just go with what you've programmed into your brain to do. And that's what the practice is all about. You get the groove. You have so many balls hit to you at second base that you know how to field it and throw it to first without even thinking anymore. You know, just field throw. And that's the key. It takes thousands of hours of practice to create the autopilot, to create the mechanisms of the muscles knowing exactly what to do this thing right. So to become a professional athlete or an Olympic athlete, it's really not about performance at all. It's about massive amounts of practice. You know, to be an amateur athlete, to just be like for fun on the weekend kind of athlete, then there's almost no practice necessary because you don't have to become world class. Then you can just play. Playing at a sport is totally different than performing at a sport where you're getting paid to do so or something like that.
Perhaps the biggest breakthrough that led to the emerging of a field called sports psychology 30, 35, maybe 40 years ago happened in Eastern Europe, and it was with Olympic athletes. It was really understanding that there was a point of diminishing return where trying harder and harder to make performance purely a function of will past its peak value. And again, point of diminishing return, where trying harder to simply will yourself into a better performance had a negative effect on the result. I mean, you have to care. You can't be apathetic, right? So caring and bringing will to a sports performance is essential. But after a certain point, these researchers found out, it begins to lead to choking and trying too hard. You get worse. You get weak. Your muscles tighten, you're not as coordinated. So then sports psychology, as it's emerging in, what would you say, the 60s or 70s? When did that? I think of the early 70s, but I've heard you say it was earlier.
Yeah, actually, the first thing I ever saw was the Russian weightlifters in the 1960 Olympics in Rome. There was a guy named Vasily Alexiev, and he did alpha. He hypnotized himself. There was no doubt. You could see his eyes roll up in his head. He visualized lifting the weight. You could see him move he rehearsed it. And then he opened his eyes, and then he did it, you know, and he set all kinds of world records. And then I read later on that he was trained by a coach to visualize, to use this alpha state. I don't think they called it that in that article, but that's what it is. So yeah, it's been around since 1960. So we're talking about 50 years. I mean, a half a century coming up, and yet officially used by teams in athletics and by Olympic trainers and stuff like that. I think you're right about the early 70s is when you first started hearing about that.
I think there's still resistance in some quarters, though you can't discount the fact that the Lakers, for example, have a coach that teaches Buddhist meditation.
Yeah, and they also have sports psychologists associated with most teams, and lots of players use them individually as well. It's a pretty common thing now, especially in basketball, in all the major sports. People do understand that, as Yogi Berra said, more than half of the game is 90% mental.
Yogi gets 2 mentions in this week's program. So part of what this emerging field, sports psychology, was about was an understanding of balance. And there's another way of looking at this if you want to use sports as an allegory for your daily life and affairs. And that's the idea that stress could be beneficial to you, so-called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, eustress, or distress. Usually, if someone talks about stress in any kind of negative way, they're talking about distress, right? Eustress is good stress. Remember, Reggie Jackson was Mr. October. He'd play at some fraction of his potential during the regular season, and then during the playoffs, he would just rise to the occasion. Maybe you're like this. As the pressure brings itself to bear, you rise to the occasion. Some people like to study this way. They put off studying till the last minute because they like the added pressure that helps them to, again, rise to the occasion. And
Christmas shopping. Is that true for Christmas shopping?
I don't think that's true. I don't think so. But a lot of us, on the other hand, don't work that way. This is largely personal. That is, the point at which eustress becomes distress. The point at which trying just a little harder reverses course, and now you're starting a down graph. You're starting to get worse and worse, and the harder you try, the worse you do, and that frustrates you and irritates you, so you redouble your efforts and do still worse, and spiraling down, have lost all sense of elegance and grace. Again, this could be sports, this could be academics, this could be psychology or philosophy or just your daily life and affairs. You've got that same process of finding the balance. Peak performance is really a balance between bringing some will to bear, but not being so willful that you exclude the imagination. You bring the will to bear. You're determined to do your best. But then willpower has to meet imagination.
Yeah, because you can't just will yourself to do better, or there'd never be a slump, or there'd never be a person who had a bad day. Will plays a role. Again, you have to care. Not caring enough, being dispassionate, being apathetic, indifferent, being bored, definitely ruins your performance. And then there's the other side of that equation, over-caring, caring so much, caring too much that the excitement turns into fear. Basically what happens is this upward spiral of excitement gets too scary, and all of a sudden the brain looks at it in a negative way, and it becomes a fear thing instead of an excitement thing. And instead of accelerating and accentuating your breathing, it's causing you to diminish your breathing and then eventually stop breathing, and the whole thing turns around, and the eustress turns into distress. So we all have a place at which that happens. I mean, there is a level at which, everybody's performance would degrade because the stress is too great. Now, some people it's much higher than other people. But the idea of sports is intentional stress. I mean, sports is we're putting you in an intentionally stressful situation to see how you do. And the ones that rise to the occasion are the ones who, with the bases loaded at the bottom of the ninth, the game on the line, do their best rather than do their worst. So stress is a really important component of what sports is about, and sports psychology, dealing with stress, is probably the most significant of all.
Part of this is the requirement to know what you want, to be, like other areas of your life, goal-oriented and specific in what it is that you want to do. The worst thing you can do in most situations in sports is put your attention on what you do not want, right? Like, you're playing basketball, you're at the free throw line, you're not going to want to think, boy, I hope I don't miss it, right? You want to think of that ball going through a well-traveled arc that you've done 1,000,000 times, swishing right down through the net without even touching the rim, hearing the cheer of the crowd, and you're just now walking up to the line. But that's what's in your imagination.
And understand, hope I don't miss it is exactly the same thing as hope I do miss it. In either case, the mind gets the exact same picture of missing it. So thinking I hope I don't miss it is not a positive thought. It's like, ultimately, logically, hope I don't miss it means hope I make it. But to the brain, all hope I don't miss it, hope I do miss it, either case gets the picture of missing it, and the mind thinks that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're picturing. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's your target. That's what you've put your attention on. So that's where the crosshairs lie. They're right there on the bullseye. This must be what the guy wants. So I can throw the ball in the gutter.
I can do that.
I can drop this golf ball over in that sand trap if that's what you're putting your attention on. And how many golfers have seen this? You go from hook to slice, and then overcompensate for the slice, and now you're back to the hook, and you go like this back and forth for weeks and never hit one straight down the fairway because you haven't had that thought in your head for the whole time. You've been compensating, you see, and thinking about what not to do rather than what it is that you should be doing. The simple law of attraction that we've talked about from time to time in this class, and you've heard about, it's no secret anymore, says basically you reap what you sow. In sports, that's you go where you look, and you get what you expect. Remember Maxwell Maltz's book from 50 or 60 years ago, Psycho-Cybernetics. That's the way the brain is wired. That's the way it works. What you put your attention on, whether you love it or fear it, that's the direction you're going to move in.
Yeah, and I think the greatest coach of all, John Wooden, said it best. He talked about the need for speed in most sports. Being quick, being fast is really important. But he said so succinctly, he said, "Go fast, but don't hurry." because hurry is where you get stressed. Hurry is when you're trying to go faster than you can. The idea is, in practice, you can go faster than you can. In practice, you can try and be better than you are. But when you're playing in the game, you go fast, but you don't hurry. You don't be better than you are. You don't attempt to do something you haven't mastered in practice. And that's such a significant thing. Now, again, if you're just playing in sports, playing to play, although I don't know. I mean, I was in Little League, and I think winning a game was just as important to me in Little League when I was 10 years old as it is to anybody. But it doesn't. If you can get to the attitude where I'm playing and it doesn't really matter. Like when I was in my 40s and I was playing pickup basketball games, I didn't really care who won. It didn't really matter at all who won. It's just I play a good game. We have a good team. It was fun. So if you can get past that and then play sports just for the pure thrill of the athleticism of it, of the exercise of it, that's one thing. But generally speaking, we've got this win-lose mentality. We've got this need to perform mentality with sports, need to look good or to not look bad. And with that comes the stress. And with that comes the psychology. Because stress does a wonderful... Stress is like pressure, like any pressure. You push two things together to create pressure, and it's going to squeeze it out both ends. Well, pressure, that kind of pressure makes people either do way, way better or way, way worse. And I think that's a great metaphor for life, just to learn what kind of pressure you do best with or how to teach yourself to do best with pressure. A big part of it, as we said, is to breathe and to let your physiology know you're safe, because if you stop breathing and then your brain thinks you're in danger, you lose access to that autopilot stuff. You switch over to fight or flight. A big part of it is to rehearse it for real, practice it over and over again so your muscles learn it, and then rehearse it in your mind. And then when you make mistakes, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And practice in that way. And then I think another really important concept when you are practicing is that at some point, practice does get you better and better, especially if you're practicing it right. At some point, you hit a plateau and you stop getting better. And at that point, most people either quit or they get so stressed because they're not getting any better, or they settle and they go, well, I guess practice doesn't make any difference. I'll go play now. If when you hit that plateau, you do one of those things, you never get to be the best you can be. What you have to do is you have to keep practicing. Even though you're not getting any better practicing now, you got to keep practicing. But you got to add the question, what do I need to change? And listen for the answer, become aware of the answer, and once you know the answer, what you need to change, institute that change, and then go on from there.
And that's where a coach can really help.
Yeah, indeed.
Today we have life coaches. Be careful, some are really skilled and some just call themselves that and may not be able to help you very much at all. Interesting profession, the way that emerged, life coaching, as opposed to a social worker or another counselor, a hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, somebody like that with really extensive training, hundreds, thousands of hours. So an objective view from an outsider really can help. But as Steve has hinted at before, you can use the levels of mind that we call paradise, these meditative, reflective levels, to gain a mindful, objective point of view, as if you were, in a sense, getting outside yourself and looking at yourself in your mind's eye. In other words, as we've already said, there has to be some willpower here. You have to care. You have to be committed. You have to persevere. Willpower is essential, but again, only to a point. Then if you try too hard, you're going to do worse. So to bring in the imagination often means to use a closed-eye process, as we'll do in a few minutes, your mind's eye, or at least an ability to feel in your body with your imagination what it would be like to do it perfectly. If you can get an image of yourself as standing 15, 20 feet away and watching yourself putt or line up a drive, bowling, tennis, whatever your game might be, or if you're a professional athlete, you know some of this in your basketball, your baseball, or your other sport. Each of us has an internal coach on the inside. Doesn't always take the place of hiring a real pro who knows what they're talking about, but I'm talking about perspective, a point of view that the imagination will provide for you when you get relaxed and call upon it. And when you marry the willpower we've talked about that takes you to the peak with the imagination that knows no limits, all things are possible.
Yeah, and sports has always been one of the great examples of how all things are possible, how we break world records over and over again, how people think something could never be done, and then somebody goes ahead and does it, So this is an opportunity for people to really show mastery. One of the great opportunities in our world today is to show masteries in sports, and it's highly rewarded. It's very lucrative if you can show mastery in those major sports in the world today. But, I think more the lessons we learn in childhood from sports, I think, that we can carry into our lives about sportsmanship, about esprit de corps, about teamwork, about feeling like being a good sport, rather than a bad sport. Those things, I think, those lessons are just so essential in our moral development, in our social interaction, our growth. Sports on a professional level has been maybe a way of dealing with replacing war, but sports on a children's level is really a sort of another way of enhancing parenthood.
And discovering self, discovering how it feels to be in your body. Children that don't play enough or don't get enough physical movement often lack a sense of kinesthetics or kinesiology. I'm not sure the right way to say that. They just don't feel grounded or at home inside their bodies, and that can actually inhibit one's ability to feel emotional feelings as well. These people tend to live in their heads somewhat, and one of the problems we have with kids watching too much TV now is that even their eyeballs don't develop because they're not playing and exploring and looking out of the corner of their eyes. They're just sitting in front of the computer screen or the TV screen. And so we got a lot to learn in these areas, but sports is a great way to flesh that out. For example, many athletes, not only professionals, but Olympic and amateur athletes, will work with special sports psychologists who teach an ability to, how can I say this, who show you how to develop visual acuity, to see more clearly out of the corner of your eye, or to, you could say, develop your peripheral vision. Now, this wouldn't even occur to most people to do, but for an athlete, there's a lot of value. I remember many times watching Magic Johnson come down the floor and make a pass to somebody that was behind him. There's he didn't know he was there. How could he possibly have even known? He didn't turn his head and look. Well, Magic has developed. He may have actually been born with the gift, but in any event, to whatever degree, he developed this ability to see behind him, really by developing that peripheral vision. And there's many other things, subtle talents that we can develop, and a lot of it is learning to use the imagination to not only see better, but to improve your hearing, your sense of where your opponent is, a feeling of oneness, a sense of, my goodness, look what's happened in basketball, a sense of ballet. Without even studying dance, these guys have become dancers, and you get a sense of all of your teammates and all the opponents as well as being part of this one organic thing that's moving back and forth on the court. It's a very beautiful thing.
It is. And, of course, part of Magic's ability was to see behind his head, but the other part was knowing James Worthy was always going to be there, because they've done it a million times together. So that's another thing, the magical thing about being a team and rehearsing and practicing as a team. The choreography of it, the knowing where the other person is on the court, the feeling as part of a five-pronged organism. It's an amazing feeling that sports gives us that we don't get in too many other places. We used to get that hunting, I would imagine. When we go out as hunter-gatherers and we'd go out in the hunting aspect, we'd have that teamwork kind of thing. And I think sports sort of helps us deal with that too. But here's a place where we develop our morals, our values, our ethics through sports oftentimes. And here's a place where bad parenting really can be ineffective. When I say bad, I don't mean evil parenting. I mean people who don't know any better, and they say to their kids, like, okay, now don't choke, or okay, now this is really important, so don't mess it up for the rest of the team by striking out this time, and putting undue pressure on their children. A lot of managers or fathers and mothers that coach, and they just get exuberant, but what they do is to tell the kid what not to do. Make sure you don't do this, and of course that implants the suggestion in the kid's mind. And I know kids who are scarred for life by teachers and coaches and gym instructors and stuff that really made them feel foolish and made them feel terribly embarrassed by making a big point of their failure and actually promoting that failure by telling them not to fail.
Well, a lot of this comes from the frustration that adults, parents, or others feel because they have not succeeded in their lives in the way in which they had hoped to succeed, so they want that success vicariously through the kid, and it puts an undue pressure on the child. Maybe the child doesn't want to play golf or tennis or baseball. and maybe they want to do something else. But dad's out there, or mom with the little girl in her beauty pageants or her ballet. It's usually mom pushing the daughter, dad pushes the sons, but a lot of it is just, you must succeed where I have failed. And it's a sad commentary that breaks the spirit of so many young kids.
You want to read a great book about that? I just read Agassi's autobiography called Open, and it was amazing. I mean, his father, from the time he was a little child, did this with his older siblings as well. They built a tennis court, and they made him work 20 hours a day playing, and he hated tennis. All his life, he hated tennis. His father made him be a great tennis player, but he just hated tennis. But he hated it with such a passion, that if he was bored with tennis or apathetic about tennis, it would have never been great. But he hated it so much, he took that passion and became the greatest tennis player, one of the greatest of all time.
Was it because his father was bad at tennis or failed at tennis?
No, it's because his father, who grew up in Eastern Europe, saw tennis as the rich man's game. He saw it like, if you want to move up in the world, you play tennis. That's the way to become something.
So it wasn't you must succeed where I failed. You must succeed because I figured out a way for us to make a lot of money.
Right. You must succeed where I didn't have a chance to succeed, and you do.
Wow. Sort of like you pull the plow, I'll walk behind.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, this is the stuff you don't know when you're the little kid, and that's why I think it's important, first of all, that parents be with their kids in all of their activities, whether it's sports or anything else that they happen to do, their hobbies. It's so important to show your children that you have an interest in whatever it is that they're interested in. That's really important. To not show up is to say, I don't care, is to say, I don't care about you, is to say, you don't matter, I've got more important things to do. And though you don't really say that out loud, you don't have to. That's the message. So get involved in your kids' stuff so they can feel important. And the second thing is, be the one who consoles them instead of the one that criticizes them, right? I always remember feeling like, I never really could say it, but I always wanted to say to my father, you don't have to tell me what I did wrong. I already have a voice in my head shouting at me. I know what I did wrong.
Sounds a lot like your voice too, Dad.
Yeah. Why not encourage me and tell me how to do it better? I used to try to make my father proud of me, and then I realized that he would be happy if I just didn't embarrass him.
Yeah.
And that crushed me even further, made it even more difficult. So then I went through a phase of not even caring about sports, and then I discovered doing it for me, which was this whole new thing, doing it for me. Oh, my goodness. Same thing with my music. I became clear early on that I just wasn't dedicated, didn't have the time, the sense of priorities to make my music into a profession, but I could do it for me. I could fiddle around by myself, play this instrument or that instrument, and have fun with it, and that was enough. And yet, I still wanted to get better and better because it felt good to get better. And the better you were, the more fun you were having, and the more fun you're having, the faster you improve. Playing an instrument is a lot like sports in that regard.
Indeed. And so it's important that we understand the development that comes from either learning a sport or learning chess or learning an instrument or learning to do something like that, because it gives us an opportunity to measure ourselves against ourselves and to see what it takes, where we get better, where we have difficulty. We learn a lot about ourselves in games and sports and activities like learning musical instruments and that sort of thing. So what we're suggesting is that this is a great venue for parents to teach their children, and parents who think, well, my kid's not doing very well at academics, so I'm going to take them out of sports, so that they have more time to do their math. That's the wrong attitude. I mean, the idea is sports is a wonderful way to learn math. It's a wonderful way to learn science. It's a wonderful way to learn English. It's a wonderful way to learn a ton of different subjects. What you do is you find what your child loves to do and teach them all the other stuff through that, rather than deprive them of what they love to do and try and teach them stuff they don't love. I've seen so many great opportunities to use sports as a metaphor to take a kid who always thought he was bad at math, but now he can do batting averages in his head. Now he can figure out earned run averages, with just a piece of paper and a pencil. And now all of a sudden math isn't so difficult anymore. So it can be a wonderful way to teach children the academics of life as well. It can be a wonderful way to teach them the values, the sportsmanship, the morals, the social codes. It's a wonderful way of creating teams and learning to work together as part of a unit, as part of a tribe, if you will. Sports is a wonderful metaphor for life. And the psychology that we use in sports really is the same psychology we can use in life, which is if you're gifted, if you are a natural at it, go for it. If you're not, find somebody who knows how to teach you the basics. Learn the fundamentals from somebody who knows how to teach you the fundamentals, and then go practice and practice with passion and practice with not caring if you make mistakes, because you want to make mistakes. You want to grow. You want to love the practice, whether you do it right or wrong. Practice is always feeling good, always doing good. And then when you go out to perform, you want to just have done it so much in practice that you can just let it happen. Just get out of your own way. And if you find your stress building by a tightening of your muscles or an emotional feeling or an intellectual confusion, you just stop. You just take a deep breath. In basketball, every great basketball, watch when they're about to take a free throw, they all stop. They have their little ritual they do. They bounce the ball twice, or they take the deep breath. They always do something to get their mind off everything else and get themselves right into the flow of that ritual. Well, you can do that you can't do that while you're dribbling the basketball, but you can do it at home as you're imagining dribbling the basketball, and you can do it at the free throw line, and you can do it before you hit the golf ball, and you can do it a lot of times in sports, and you can always do it at home in between games and practice it in your mind.
And that's the inner game. That's the visualization or guided imagery part of this that Steve's describing. The way to get your mind out of it is to use the mind, as we've described, first the will and then the imagination, to visualize what you do want. Don't put your attention on what you do not want and then try to avoid it or compensate for it. The golfer, every time he or she approaches the ball, whether it's at the tee or in the middle of the fairway or chipping out of the rough or whatever, the image is the same. You see it going directly into the cup, and you even hear the sound of the ball. Listen. There, did you hear the sound of the ball?
Was it a perclunk?
Yeah, it sure was. Or a tennis player. You know when that tennis ball hits
thwunk.
the sweet...
I think that's called thwunk.
Okay. I think that's Yiddish.
Oh, maybe.
And the tennis player knows the sweet spot. When you hit that ball just right, there's a little place in the racket, not much bigger than the surface of the ball, that is the sweet spot. A basketball player, a bowler, before the ball leaves the tips of your fingers, you know if it's going to go through the hoop or score a strike. You can feel it. See? So you use visualization to create the groove, to visualize the goal, the destination, the outcome. And then you bring the emotions, the passion into play. First the focus, now the passion, by feeling yourself doing it perfectly. That hole in one, that corner shot in tennis or racquetball, that basketball going through the hoop, whoosh, that feeling. I mean, before, as I say, before your feet are back on the ground from the jump shot, you know it's going through. Go for the feeling. You start with the head and then turn it over to the feeling in the body.
And do allow for the fact that what you're visualizing is the perfect outcome, not just a good outcome. You always see the ball right into the hole. Now, or landing exactly on that spot in the fairway you wanted to land. You're not going to do that. I mean, the likelihood of you actually getting exactly what you imagine, the ball whooshing right through the hoop without touching any of the sides. I mean, if you're off a millimeter, it'll hit one of the sides. It'll still go through. That's still 2 points. But the bottom line here is you visualize the target, the bullseye of the target. You visualize in sports exactly what you want to happen. You visualize the sweet spot on the tennis racket, that thwonk of the baseball hitting the ball. You imagine it going perfectly, and then your mind does its best to get as close to approximate that thing you visualized. Now, in real life, people don't do this. In real life, people don't imagine the best possible outcome. They imagine some good outcome, some okay outcome. Well, it would be nice if outcome. Most people are terrified of the idea of imagining like being the best possible outcome, because then they're setting themselves up for disappointment, and people are scared about that. Well, in sports, you have to let go of that, because in sports, you always imagine the best possible outcome. You always rehearse hitting the home run or at least the single. You never rehearse, striking out. You always rehearse a positive outcome. So in real life, we've got to start doing that. We've got to start using sports as a great metaphor, because if we imagine hitting the sweet spot and making that sail, or putting that ball right on the line, when you're teaching a class, or have that same metaphor, that same feeling of being the best you can be, because the job matters, and practice, and then really give it your all. I think we always want to aim for the sweet spot.
Now, there are different applications in different sports to this idea of the inner game, the guided imagery exercise. I remember working with the USC women's tennis team in the early 80s. We set up 3 different approaches to guided imagery or visualization. One that the women could do before a game. They could do at night in bed before they fell asleep. They could do in the locker room after a session. They could close their eyes. That was one approach to visualizing the perfect game, contrasting it with what they'd actually done, reviewing in their mind how they could do better, what it is that they're trying to do, and so on. So that's the first one. The other 2 were for use during the game. One, when the ball was not in play, as they're returning to their positions and one is about to serve again, a little visualization exercise that you can go through.
In a few seconds, I guess.
Oh, yeah. You're not going to close your eyes, but you can breathe, and you can relax, and you can soften your gaze, and you can relax your countenance even for 10, 15 seconds. Shake it all off as if you're going to start over and reorient yourself, right? Get back in that balanced sense, which supplants where you would otherwise be, nervous and worried, and how did I do, and Bill's up in the stands, what's he thinking, and my mother's over here, and what are they going to say, and all of that multitasking that goes on. You just breathe and let it go. And then the third was, how are you maintaining the mindfulness that you need during the game to do your best?
Essentially, the non-thinking, the mindfulness, the part of you that's aware of that you're just trained to do this, and you're going to let yourself do it.
Yep.
That's the real secret. Get out of your own way. The more you think, in practice, thinking is very essential. You got to learn things in practice. But in performance, the more you can just get out of your way and not think, and just allow your muscles to do what they've been trained to do, the better. And I think that's true in many aspects of life, but not in all aspects of life. There's some aspects of life where we need to continually be aware and think and be conscious, and because things are going to change all the time. But there are many, many things we do that we can learn to become masterful at. Now, each person has a limit to how many things they can become masterful at. You can become masterful by that I mean the best you can be at anything. You can't, of course, become the best you can be at everything because there's not enough time, but selectively you can pick some things if it really matters to you and become truly excellent, maybe not world class. If you weren't born with a gift, world class is highly unlikely, but at least the best you can be. But selectively, you have to choose those things. And I think sports is a great opportunity for children to understand how it feels to be good at something. Whatever aspect of it is. Some kids are not very good at sports, and maybe chess is a better way for them to feel what they're good at. But one of the most important things, games, contests, opportunities to pit ourselves against someone else can do for our self-esteem. If we feel like a winner, it's a good feeling. I think every child needs the experience of feeling like they found something they're really good at and they really enjoy doing it, because greatness at any endeavor spills over into every endeavor. And I think it's really important to learn how to win, but it's also really important to learn how to lose graciously and how to win graciously, and use the opportunity of the competition in a positive way. If competition becomes the be all and end all, that's never a good thing. If you're not in it for, doesn't matter who wins or loses, how you play the game that counts. If that's not the bottom line for you, then you're looking at it in the wrong way. But there is value, I think, in competition and in winning and losing at certain age levels, as long as it doesn't become the most and only important thing.
Who's that, Lombardi? Vince Lombardi?
Winning's not the most important thing. It's the only thing, something like that?
Yeah, well, he's totally wrong.
Yeah.
There is getting better. There is growing. There is self-actualization or self-realization. There is sportsmanship and teamwork and brotherhood and loyalty and camaraderie and team spirit. all of which has little or nothing to do with winning.
And besides, the guy that lost the Super Bowl still made millions of bucks. I mean, it wasn't like all was lost because they didn't win that one game.
Did they get a ring, too?
No, I don't think they get a ring, but they get everything else, you know.
Well, they have them on eBay. I know that.
Well,
so
I'm sure.
Anybody could get a ring if you have enough money. Let's do it. Let's do that guided imagery exercise, keeping in mind now that sports is an allegory for life. So anything you learn in this context, you can use in many other areas of your life as well. So get comfortable and close your eyes and take a couple of slow, deep breaths, filling your lungs with strength and power as you inhale. And as you exhale, just as slowly, create and sense the feeling of letting go.
And as you feel your muscles release, your emotions feel at peace, all confusion simply does cease, and you feel clear. This is your peaceful place, right now, right here. And beginning in this peaceful place, clearing out your mind, the most important thing you discover, the most important thing you find, is that you're a good sport, that you feel honest and true, that you have integrity and honesty in what you do. And so start with that feeling of confidence and pride, feeling that comes from the knowledge inside that you are a good sport, that you can win with grace and lose and not lose face, that you can lose with dignity and win with aplomb, that you're a good sport, and that's the foundation that you build on.
Wherever you place the importance on winning, keeping track of the score, maybe it's very important to you, maybe it matters not. But consider that in any event, how you play the game is where the richness is. The adventure is in the journey, not arriving at the destination. The adventure is in the journey. It's in the unfolding of you getting better, of testing your limits, of trying new things and learning, of believing in yourself and going for it, stretching, pushing the envelope. And so choose a sport, any sport now, and choose an area of that sport that you've been working on. And if you're not particularly athletic, you could do the same thing for playing a musical instrument or expressing yourself through art or dance. Any form of personal expression. Imagine yourself doing it as if you were in the audience watching yourself up on the stage, or as if you were in the stands watching yourself on the court or the field. And with a sense of detachment, not dissociation, you're very interested, but still you're somewhat detached, and you see yourself playing the game from this mindful perspective. See yourself doing it better and better. See yourself now incorporating some of the new moves. And again, whether this is sports or singing or dance or expression of your artwork, see yourself doing it just a little better, and then just a little better.
And as the picture of you getting just a little better and just a little better continues to grow, you get toward the picture where you're the best and you know that this is the ultimate target. This is for what you wish to aim. This is what you want to say is mine. This is what you want to claim. The best outcome, the best that you could possibly be. That's what you want to imagine. That's what you want to visualize. That's what you want to see. And so you give your mind directions, focused and clear. This is where I want to go right now, right here. Imagine exactly what you want as if it's already true. Imagine it over and over there inside of you, and imagine it with great passion. And as you do, your mind becomes very clear, with excitement and free of fear. This is here. Let's go here. Let's be here. Let's do this now, here. Imagine what you want as if it's already true, over and over inside of you. And as you do, let the passion come through, and your mind will work to make it true. That's what you need to do.
And so you collapse from that detached perspective to a feeling of being within yourself as you peak on that performance. As you explode with creativity, with physical exertion, with the best time, the best outcome, the best result you can imagine, and you feel that in the very core of your being, as if racing like an energy, an electricity through your body, out the tips of your fingers, the bottoms of your feet, and even out your hair. This yahoo, this experience of enthusiasm and excitement at having bested yourself. And know that this too is but another step of your continual unfoldment.
So allow sports to be for you a chance to see what you can do, a chance to put yourself through some experiences where you get to learn, where there's some lessons that you get to earn. And whether it's sports or music or drama or art or wherever it is you finish or start, whatever it is you want to do, just imagine the best and allow that to influence you. Imagine the best you can be, the best you can do, the best performance that you could create. When you imagine what you want, don't settle for good. Push it all the way to great. All the way to great. In a few moments, we're going to ask you to return to Wide Awake, but from this experience in this land of sport, we want you all to take the metaphor and be very clear. Sports is a great way to take what was once called fear and turn it into excitement, and be excited as you do, because you make it all a sport. You make it fun. And then the excitement comes right through. So as it feels comfortable for you, become aware of the room, the time, the place, where you are in space, and with a deep breath, bring yourself back to Wide Awake.
Feeling fine, feeling rested, feeling wonderful at having expressed yourself. That's really what it's about. It's about the imperative, really, the need that we all have to not only be, but to express our being. It seems tragic. Listening to this episode that we've just done for you here today, it seems to me particularly tragic and frankly quite stupid that the first programs that are often cut by school systems when they have a financial problem are sports and music, when these are the areas that are most responsible for creating civilized human beings. I just can't imagine somebody having sports available to them and music, practicing their instrument, and then going out and gangbanging or tagging walls or getting into trouble. It's that need to express that if it's denied, we'll find some way out. It's like that law of randomness in Jurassic Park. You know, what you did what? Oh, no, that's not going to work. You won't fool Mother Nature. She'll find a way to get these dinosaurs pregnant. And human beings must express themselves. Dylan said he not busy being born is busy dying. So we've got to give our children, give ourselves opportunities to express creatively our individuality. Sports, art, music, use all these areas and more to express yourself. You'll feel good about it.
And parents, let your children express themselves. Dylan also said you shouldn't let other people get your kicks for you. Don't live vicariously through your kids. Let them express whatever their natural gift, talent, and ability is. If their passion is for soccer instead of for baseball, let them play soccer. There's the same lessons can be learned in any of the sports. And whatever it is that they are challenged by, sports can be a wonderful metaphor to help them overcome those challenges. So whatever it is you're challenged by, whatever it is that needs healing inside of you, we probably have a show that was on that very subject. Check out our archives. We've got 5 score and some odd shows down there for you to look at.
And remember to use our Send One to a Friend gadget at FocusedPassion.com. It's right under the built-in player. As many of these programs as you'd like to people that you know who you think could probably find some interest, some value. I mean, think now. Who do you know that would really benefit from hearing this particular program? Well, log into your account at FocusedPassion.com, and you'll see the gadget right under the built-in player to send one to a friend. Share this podcast. It won't cost you a nickel, okay? It's one of the benefits of being a subscriber at FocusedPassion.com. As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for being with us. Be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.